Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock, Drogheda. I'm Nick Park, and I'm taking us through a short series of teachings on dinner with Jesus. We're looking at those times when Jesus ate with people, or they ate with him, and that where always on those occasions something happened. It was never just, well, we had dinner with Jesus. How was it? Great. What happened? Not much. What did you talk about? Talk. No, there's always seems to be something worth recording when Jesus met with people for a meal. And today we're looking at what was actually more of a snack than a dinner. Funny how we are about that sometimes. I know people who will very faithfully and very religiously, they wouldn't dream of eating a meal without praying it over beforehand. But, buy them a bag of crisps and they'll wolf it down without praying about it at all. I don't know why we think of it that way, but that's sometimes the way we apply our traditions is strange. Well, anyway, Jesus was with his disciples and they weren't at the table. They were walking in a cornfield. And again, there's 3 of the Gospels record this. It's in Matthew chapter 12, it's in Mark chapter 2, and it's in Luke chapter 6. And anyway, they're walking through the cornfield and the disciples are picking the ears of corn and rubbing them to rub the husks off them and then eating them. It was a way, if you were going to be a while until you got your dinner, it was a way to just stave off hunger. But it was the Sabbath day, and according to the scribes' interpretation of the Jewish law, this was forbidden, this was unlawful. And so they challenged them about it, and Jesus responds by reminding them of an incident from the Old Testament with David. Whenever Saul was pursuing David, and David went to the tabernacle, which was at a place called Nod, and he went there, and there was this showbread. It was bread that was set up in the tabernacle, and that was only to be eaten by the priests. But because David and his men were all hungry and had gone quite a while without food, the high priest gave them the showbread and they ate it. And you know what? That was against the law. And Jesus himself says, according to Matthew, Jesus says this was unlawful, and yet they did it. And then Jesus also quotes the verse that he quoted before on a previous occasion when he said, Hosea chapter 6, verse 6, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And here we see Jesus approaching these food laws with a very different view to how the scribes did. You see, the scribes said keeping these laws in the finest detail was the most important thing possible. It was the most important thing you could do. And so, for example, there was a story of a rabbi who was imprisoned by the Romans, and he only had a very limited supply of water, a ration of water provided, but he did all the ceremonial washing that the Jews used to do with the water and didn't have anything left to drink, and nearly died of thirst. Now, we would probably look at that and say that was pretty stupid. But the Jews looked at that and said, what a hero. This guy is a real warrior for God because of that. So quite a different view of it. But you know what? In the body of Christ, we've come to learn that just being absolutely strict about keeping every little rule is actually not as important as caring for people. I mean, in David's case, if him and his followers were going to collapse with exhaustion and end up all being killed by Saul, the high priest said it's better to actually break one of the regulations and give them some of this bread from the altar than it is to have them all, the guys and David, who's God's anointed servant, getting killed. And as we as Christians, one of the modern stories that we love to celebrate is that of Corrie ten Boom, the young Dutch lady who, along with her family, sheltered Jews from the Nazis in their home. And the way we often tell it is, in the end, Corrie and her sister Betsy were sent to a concentration camp because they were discovered sheltering Jews. Betsy died in the concentration camp in Ravensbrück, but Corrie survived. Actually, the Ten Booms were not sent to jail for caring for Jews. They were sent to jail and to concentration camp for breaking the laws about rationing. Because under the rationing system that was in place at the time, in order to feed their Jews, they needed ration cards, and they used forged ration cards they got from the Dutch resistance in order to buy food. And that was why they were sent to prison. They were sent to prison for breaking the law about forging ration cards. But the reason they broke the law was because they were trying to save these Jews from a horrific death in the concentration camp. Now, Jesus was saying this. He's saying a new day is coming where walking in love and mercy is more important than saying I've got a 100% record at keeping the law. Now, Jesus himself, by the way, he didn't eat of the corn in the field like his disciples were, because Jesus did keep the law perfectly. Why? Because to die on the cross for us as our sacrifice for sin, he had to be the perfect human being that had never broken the law. But he was not bothered about the disciples, because the disciples were being prepared for an age that was to come where the emphasis was not on how good your record was at keeping the rules, but their emphasis was on reaching out with the love and mercy of Jesus and bringing life to people. Now, this is not an excuse for lawlessness. It's not an excuse for doing what we want and breaking the law all the time, but it is a call to mercy. And Jesus revealed it to us during this incident when he was with the disciples in the cornfield. Join us again next time for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.